Good afternoon. It's great to see all of you. My name is Gina Toma. It is my great pleasure on behalf of the entire Martin School and its Board of Visitors to welcome you to the 6th annual Wendell Ford Lecture. We have this lecture each year to honor the legacy of Wendell Ford, the contributions he made to the country, to the state, to the University of Kentucky, and especially to the Martin School of Public Policy. Lots of you know the Martin School as a place that has had a great reputation for its graduate programs. We've been a top 25 program for years, and I have something very exciting to tell you today. As of today, you can apply to be an undergraduate major in public policy. It's literally the case that they opened the portal today, so we're pretty excited. But today we're not only highlighting this very important topic, the increasing role of women in public policy, we're also marking the eve of next year's 100th anniversary of women's suffrage with a special program later this evening. We are going to be recognizing 10 modern-day Kentucky women trailblazers. All of these persons have had truly extraordinary achievements in their respective careers. Most of them are here this afternoon, and I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order. What I would like for you to do is, in the interest of time, please hold your applause, and I'll have all of them stand at the end. But just at this moment, what we're going to do is introduce you to these 10 amazing women. Roz Aikens, an educator who's devoted her career to addressing the achievement gap between African American boys and their peers. Myra Ball, the first woman to chair the University of Kentucky Board of Trustees. Jennifer Kaufman, the first female federal district judge in Kentucky. Martha Lane Collins, Kentucky's first and so far only female governor. Virginia Fox, the first woman executive director and CEO of the Kentucky Educational Television Network. The late Lois Gray, who led her family business, Gray Construction, to become one of the nation's top commercial construction firms. Crit Llewellyn, our former lieutenant governor, who's the first woman to serve in the post of Secretary of Finance and State Budget Director, and then served as state auditor. Pam Miller, the first woman to serve as mayor of Lexington, a post she held for 10 years from 1993 to 2003. Renee Shaw, who in 2005 launched the first statewide minority affairs program on KET. Marsha Weinstein, the former chair of the Kentucky Commission on Women, who's known nationally for her leadership in promoting women's issues. As you can see, this is an incredible list of women with amazing careers for the state of Kentucky. What I want to do is to ask them to stand, face the audience, and we recognize them with a round of applause before we begin our program. So today we had some debate about this, but we decided we're going to let one male come up to the podium. So the lucky guy who gets this opportunity is Dave Adkins. Partly we're letting him do this because he's from that other K-state that wears blue. That's probably the worst thing about him. Otherwise, he's a pretty good guy. He's the executive director, the CEO of the Council of State Governments. As many as you know, it's a national association of all state and territorial governments in the U.S. We're very fortunate that it's headquartered here in Lexington. David serves as a member of the Martin School Board of Visitors. We have several other of those as well here today, and perhaps before I finish, you should stand at this moment, all those Board of Visitor members. All of our Board of Visitors are really helpful to the Martin School. CSG actively partners with the Martin School. They hire students and graduates to help advance the Council's mission to champion excellence in state government to advance the common good. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Dave Atkins.
Well, it's a pleasure to be the token man on today's program. When Gina invited me, I said, "So you just want me for eye candy?" And she said, "Sweetie, you're not cute enough for eye candy." I said, "It's really awkward. There's so many qualified women that could do this job." And she said, "Don't worry. We're going to pay you 78 cents on the dollar for every dollar we pay the other panelists." So it all works out. And it's just a real treat to have two of our presenters here today. As a former legislator from the state of Kansas, I had the opportunity to work with Kathleen Sebelius. We served 2 years in the House as she was leaving the House and I was coming in. We shared 2 years. She went on to serve as insurance commissioner and governor, and I went on not to. And she said, if you just focused, you might have done better. But when it came time to move to Kentucky, I was a vice chancellor at the University of Kansas, and I went in to see the governor and said, you know, I'm fifth generation Kansan. It's really difficult to think that I would ever give up my Kansas driver's license and move to Kentucky. And she said, don't worry, they'll embrace you. They've named a basketball arena after a Kansan. Their tradition in basketball wouldn't be possible but for Adolph Rupp. And he learned from Fog Allen at the University of Kansas, so that they'll appreciate you. And when I first came here, my first lunch to meet with a community leader was with Mayor Gorton. She was told to be my navigator for Lexington. And I said, I'm new here. I came as a Jayhawk. I'm not sure I'll be welcomed. And she said, embrace it. We've won so many more games than they have. So they were very helpful. In thinking about setting the context for today's program, I couldn't help but hear the echo of Barbara Jordan's words as a freshman member of Congress member of the Judiciary Committee during the Watergate hearings. She said so poignantly, "We the people," the very words that established the government of the United States. And she said for her, a woman of color, those words did not include her for many, many years. As we think about where we stand today, 99 years after universal suffrage was guaranteed as a matter of that document, there is a history to recall. The vestiges of that history are reflected in the structures of government, in the processes of government, and the ways in which society is organized through its political currency or through its business relationships that conspire against a universal truth. That universal truth is that talent is universally distributed. Opportunity is not. And when we think about the context for today's discussion about what is in it for us as a body politic to elect more women to positions of office, public office, the simple fact of the matter is it is against our self-interest not to do so. And yet, we continue to perpetuate those institutions and systems that do not serve our best interests. It was Thomas Jefferson who forever changed the way people thought of a relationship with government by saying, these truths are self-evident, that all men are created equal. And yet at the time he wrote them, there was nothing self-evident about that. In fact, in the year in which he was elected president, 1800, the famous, now told in the Hamilton musical, that after 36 ballots, the House elected Jefferson after a tied electoral college. But in that election, out of the total US population, only 5.23 million people, of 5.23 million people, only about 600,000 people were eligible to vote. Only in Maryland could black men born free vote until 1802, when the state's constitution was amended to exclude them. Only in New Jersey could white women vote until 1807, when the state legislature closed this loophole. Of the 16 states in the Union, all but 3, Kentucky, Vermont, and Delaware, limited suffrage to property holders or taxpayers, and they made up 60 to 70% of the adult white male population. Today, more than 50% of all Americans are women, and in every presidential election since 1980, the proportion of women voting exceeds those of men. In election turnout in 2018, 8.4 million women, more women voted than men. And in 2018, nearly 10 million more women are registered to vote than men. The numbers have changed profoundly in recent years, but if we look over the span of the last 4 decades, today in Congress, there are 127 of the 535 seats, 25 members of the Senate and 102 in the House, for a total of 23.7% of our national legislature. In 1979, only 3% of that body was female. Statewide offices, 311 elected statewide offices. Of those today, 91 are women, 29.3%. In 1979, that was 11%. And we've tied the record this year with 9 female governors, or 18% of our state's chief executives. But in the course of our nation's history, there have only been 44 women who have served as governors in 30 states. The state legislatures in the last election saw a great increase in female representation, a net gain of 259 seats out of 7,383 total, for a total of 22,133 female legislators. In 1979, there were only 10% of the state legislative seats held by women. Today, that is 28.9. Think about local leadership. For cities over 30,000 people, there are 1,412 of those cities. And of those cities, 295 have females serving as mayor, or 20.9%. Of the 100 largest cities, 27 have female mayors. We have to ask ourselves, well, that hovering around 30%, that's progress, but is it good enough? We have to think about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who, when asked, replied that there will be enough women on the Supreme Court when there are 9. And why does it matter? Well, there's established and growing evidence that women's leadership in political decision-making processes actually improves them. Women demonstrate political leadership by working across party lines, often through women's caucuses, even in the most politically combative environments, and by championing issues of gender equality, such as the elimination of gender-based violence, parental leave and childcare, pensions, gender equity laws, and electoral reform. As one political scientist said, women share their power more, men guard their power. In fact, a majority of Americans today believe that more women should, in fact, be elected to public office. And on the traits of leadership that they see, they give a relative advantage to women in many fronts, in terms of being more compassionate and empathetic, serving as a role model for children, working out compromises, being honest and ethical, maintaining a tone of civility and respect, standing up for what you believe in, being persuasive. Americans give the nod to women over men in the political arena on those traits. They give equal weight to men and women on working well under pressure, and only on one trait are men considered more in favor, and that is being willing to take risks. An interesting observation. Well, our panelists today get to sort all of this out, from their own personal experiences as trailblazers themselves to the kinds of public servants that are principled and effective. Our moderator today is an exceptional journalist. Margaret Carlson is the Washington editor of The Week and a political columnist for Bloomberg News. In 1988, Carlson joined Time magazine and served as White House correspondent and deputy Washington bureau chief. From 1994 to 2005, she wrote the Public Eye column for Time magazine, becoming the first female columnist in the magazine's history. At CNN, Carlson appeared on Crossfire and Inside Politics, and for 15 years served as a panelist weekly on The Capitol Gang. Her journalism career has also included stints as a managing editor at The New Republic and the Washington bureau chief for Esquire magazine. She'll be helping facilitate a conversation with two exceptional state and local leaders. Linda Gorton is a friend to many of you. We often believe there have to be 5 or 6 of her, given all of the places she appears across Lexington. But her passion for this city is unmistakable. She was the longest continuously serving member of the Lexington Fayette Urban County Council and is serving in her first term as Lexington mayor now. She was elected with a landslide of over 63% of the vote and inaugurated in this facility just very recently. Like Governor Sebelius, she's a native of Ohio. She lived in Lexington most of her adult life, and in addition to her 16 years on the city and county council, including 4 years as vice mayor, she's been a dedicated volunteer, helping sow the seeds of a stronger, more vibrant, and welcoming community. Her issues that she's focused on as mayor include breaking the cycle of opioid addiction, encouraging economic development and economic equity, as well as a focus on military and veterans, which comes from her personal experience being married to a retired major in the Army, having a son who is an Army Black Hawk pilot, and a son-in-law who is an Air Force F-16 pilot. She's a registered nurse and a graduate of the University of Kentucky. And finally, our panelist is Kathleen Sebelius, elected to the Kansas House, and then, for the first time as a woman and as a Democrat, elected the insurance commissioner in Kansas, serving as a fierce advocate for consumers and developing an expertise for a realm of regulatory power that the states alone have, knowing and understanding how insurance products can and should be brought to market. After serving as governor, President Obama tapped her to serve as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. In that role, she had nearly 90,000 people working for her and a $1 trillion budget. Forbes magazine listed her as one of the 100 most powerful women in the world. Her father was the governor of Ohio, and in that she represents the only daughter, father, governor team in American history. She currently lives in Lawrence, Kansas, and stays active, working in leadership roles with the Kaiser Family Fund. She co-leads the Health Strategy Group for the Aspen Institute and serves on a number of innovative, up-and-coming corporate boards seeking to bring products to market and services to market that will continue to enhance and serve the goal of advancing human health. As governor, she is remembered in Kansas as someone who not only had a pragmatic but professional sense of developing public policy, but someone who, of necessity, in a red state, had to work across the aisle, forging coalitions and ultimately serving the common good. We're thrilled that these 3 leaders are part of this year's Wendell Ford Lecture and looking forward to how they can inform our views of how the world can even be better by electing more women to public office. Would you join me in welcoming them?
Hi. Good afternoon. I've been labeled the facilitator, which I think means I'll be butting in every so often with Kathleen and Linda because they have so much on-the-ground experience. I'm overwhelmed by your bios, even though I read them, listening to them again. So David gave you a lot of statistics about how women have advanced, and I have a bulletin, an index of women's progress from inside the Beltway. It is an index of bathrooms, clothing, and sex.
Very good.
The first is a room of their own. A 2-stall ladies' restroom opened outside Senate chambers in 1993, meaning female lawmakers could quit queuing up at public restrooms blocks away with the tourists during votes. And in 2011, it wasn't until 2011, a 4-stall lounge opened on the House side. As of 2006, Congress recognized mothers. And there's a baby in the house, an adorable baby. There are small rooms across the Capitol where women can nurse privately, and there are diaper changing tables unfolding in 170 bathrooms. That's how many there are now. And Tammy Duckworth became the first senator to give birth while in office, and so the Senate changed its rules to allow a baby on the floor. But do not bring your toddler. There's a 1-year age limit. And then most remarkably, the pool in the Capitol gym was male only at one time. And when women arrived, they managed to get nude swimming ended so that the women could actually use the pool. So it's now everyone in the pool. So I have 2 trailblazers here, and a mayor and a governor and a cabinet secretary. You are Madam Secretary. We are devoted to that program, Madam Secretary. My only objection is she's way too nice. I don't think you can be that likable, which we'll get to at some point today. Women are burdened with being likable in addition to everything else. It's like, most of you are too young to remember this, but Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, it was said she had to do everything he did, only backwards and in high heels. So
That's great.
I think mayors make the world go round, or the country go round, because if you don't pick up the garbage, I'm going to be really mad at you.
Yes, you are.
But it's a very satisfying job, I think. I'm from Pennsylvania, I knew Mayor Ed Wendell very well. And in fact, it's a longer story, but the reason I have grandchildren is because of Mayor Ed Wendell. But if we have time, I will tell you the story. And it's an executive role, which I think is harder for women to get. I don't know if in David's statistics, but women have made their gains in legislative roles more than executive ones. So how did you, whenever I'm at a college talking, what the students always want to know is, first of all, how did you get where you are? And really underneath that is, how did you get so lucky? And it's true, there's a lot of luck involved in how we weave our way through, especially when you're young. I went to law school, which was a terrible mistake, because I didn't want to be getting the coffee, and I thought, okay, if I'm a lawyer, I won't have to get the coffee. But I never practiced law. But I do think that there was a time early on where women had to do something to be more serious and to be taken seriously. I don't know if you confronted that. I'm probably the oldest person here because I have lots of grandchildren.
I bet you're not. I bet you're not.
But in 1994, a woman columnist at Time magazine was such an anomaly that it was written about in the New York Times. So it was only 1994 when that was a milestone. So, Mayor, tell us, how did you not get so lucky, but how did you get where you deserve to be?
Hard work, perseverance. I really don't, I had never thought of luck in the whole scenario because it just, we have worked so hard. I come to this from kind of an old-fashioned perspective. I was one of 4 kids. My parents, we just worked all the time when we weren't in school. That was what the family did. And we knew that if we wanted to achieve anything, we had to work for it. And so that kind of, traveled into my adult life. And my husband, who is here, will tell you we worked our fannies off on campaigns and understanding the issues and I mean, it really, I'm sure there was some luck somewhere, but for me, I think a lot of it was perseverance and hard work. And, you know, when you're at the mayoral level, you are right with the people every day. And I had a state legislator tell me one time, I would never do what you do. And I said, why not? It's the best job in the world. And he said, because you live right next to your constituents and they're there all the time. Well, that's what I love about it, is they are there all the
Did they
time.
phone you when the garbage doesn't get picked
Oh,
up?
yes. Particularly when I was a council member for so long. You know, council members and mayors are supposed to fix everything, right? And there are very high expectations. And I say a lot of times, you know, so much of politics is at the local level when you think about it. And yet, what we do at the local level is not political. Garbage, streets, parks, all of the services we provide, they're not political. You know, I am very lucky. I work in a nonpartisan position. All of our local officials here are nonpartisan, and I
Oh, that
think
helps.
that is, for local government, is such a dream. We don't get tied up in the Republican, Democrat, whatever, political. We're nonpartisan. And at the local level, it's great.
Yes.
You know, it makes a lot of sense.
Right. So, may I call you Kathleen?
No. We've known each other for a very long time.
Right, yeah. Or I could do Madam Secretary, up to you.
No. It's good.
As governor, you know, back to Mayor Wendell, he went from mayor to governor and then was asked to run for a higher office. And he said the further away you get from being mayor, the less you're, you know, just down there with the people.
Yes.
and having that feeling of getting something done. I didn't know you when you were governor, but as Secretary of HHS, you may have made the most lasting contribution of the Obama years. My brother, for instance, has 2 children. One's 22 and one's 24, and they wouldn't have health insurance if you didn't cover kids up until 26. And I'm sure there are many people in the audience that have felt what you have done. So you kind of kept your hands on the people. HHS kind of says that. And you were in a cabinet that looked like America, so, as they said. So you weren't totally alone there. You had Donna Shalala.
No, she was a predecessor. She was in the Clinton years. She had my job
Oh,
for
before.
Bill Clinton. Yeah.
But there were other women in
Janet
the cabinet.
Apollo. Yeah, about half of us were women.
Yes, right. It was quite remarkable. How did you get to where you were? I mean, there's your father, a governor in Ohio. You're out in Kansas. There's not a lot of, you know, name rec because your father was a governor in Ohio. Although I love this, you know, you're the only one, daughter and father. So how did you? You know, as I said, I went to law school to try to get a leg up. How did you get going?
Well, I did grow up in born and raised in Cincinnati, and my dad was in political life. He was a city council member, often the only Democrat on the Cincinnati City Council, which in Cincinnati was a partisan office to have. He was a member of Congress. He ultimately was a governor, and I actually got married in the Ohio governor's mansion. But as my father used to say to me, I had to enter a witness protection program and move to a new state, take a new name, and then I could run for office. There may have been some truth to that. So like the mayor, I'm a native of Ohio, but I would say in history and in tradition, Ohio is actually less welcoming to women than Kansas is. Kansas has this long tradition of women in elective office. Women could vote in Kansas 8 years before they could vote nationally. Women could own property in Kansas. When even women couldn't vote, Kansas elected all women governments. So it founded by abolitionists, it has this very rich tradition. I am actually the second woman governor, and right now, in January, we inaugurated the third woman governor of Kansas. So it is a state that still ranks kind of in the middle in terms of women in the legislature, but I would say running as a woman is not as unusual as it is in many places. A woman has held every office in the state, and I did break that glass ceiling in 1994 when I was the elected insurance commissioner. It was the only office that a woman had never held. A Democrat also had never held it. But, you know, so
And
we've
why
had...
did you choose that one?
That was a very bizarre choice. I'd been a legislator for 8 years, and I loved being in the legislature, learned a lot being in the legislature. The Clinton health bill had failed in the early 90s, and I figured the Office of Insurance Commissioner had to have something to do with insurance, health insurance. We literally didn't know much about it was totally opaque. It was totally the old boys club. My two predecessors had each served as commissioner, and then the assistant became commissioner for 50 years. To say there was no short-term memory in the office was a stretch. So I decided that, and frankly, a lot of my friends said just what you said. Why would you run for that office? But decided that it was an office where you could run as an outsider, which I certainly was, and run as a consumer protection person, and teach people of Kansas a little bit about the office by saying I wouldn't take money from anyone who the office regulated was not only a new pledge, but it taught the people of Kansas that the insurance commissioner actually was bought and sold by the industry. Because that's where all the campaign money had come from. Now, for me, it sounds like a very lofty pledge to make, and it was an important line in the sand. But when you're running against the incumbent, how many people do you think who are doing insurance business in Kansas are going to give a check to this outsider long shot race? So saying I wouldn't take money was not a huge sacrifice. On the other hand, because frankly, they'd be crazy if they gave me money. But it also was a way of couching the office as I'm going to work for consumers. I will work for the people, not the companies, not. And through a series of, there was certainly a lot of luck involved, but also David Atkins, it was you, when I came to a debate in Johnson County, in the suburban Kansas City area, the wealthiest part of our state. And my opponent, as my mother would say, was an unfortunate-looking man. And we debated, and my friend David Atkins said to me afterwards, well, thank God you have the good sense to look like a Republican. And I knew I would be okay. You know, it was gonna be fine. But it turned out to be a great, not only an incredible learning experience.
How did you win it, given that you're up against the insurance commissioner, the
Well,
safe bet?
He had been, his predecessor had, they'd been self-dealing out of the office for a long time. Let me start there. And his predecessor, who he'd worked for as assistant, had filed a very expensive workers' comp claim as insurance commissioner, and they ran the workers' comp program. And then appeared regularly on the golf course and had his handicap continue to go down while he was collecting a big work comp settlement. My opponent, who had only been commissioner, he'd been assistant for 25 years, but he'd been commissioner a short time, resigned from office the day before a bill came into effect passed by the legislature which said you cannot work full-time for the state and collect more than $12,000 a year in a pension. He resigned, he took his pension, and then he reappointed himself the next day. So by the time I ran against him, he'd beaten the law going into effect. So by the time I ran against him, he was the highest paid individual in the state of Kansas. And a lot of people felt that that was really not playing by the rules. So there were some things that they had done. They were just so used to making up their own rules and making up that they sort of forgot. I was able to raise a bunch of money. I was able to put a lot of that on television. And since nobody knew what the office did, and I said, I'm going to work for you and not the insurance companies. And most people, you might like your insurance agent. I can guarantee you nobody likes their insurance company. So that became a prime target. And it worked. The terrifying thing was it worked. Because then I had to figure out what the hell the office did. I mean, literally, I didn't know anybody who worked there. I didn't know what they did. It was a multi-billion-dollar business, and I thought I could really screw this up. But it turns out the bar was set very, very low.
So, before you get on to your other positions, this strikes me as one way women have into elected office. So many times, they're the reformer. They're going to clean up the place. Bring in the broom, sweep it out, get rid of the dark money, and do the job right. And around the country, that happens. It especially happens at the mayoral level, and surely in insurance. But women looking for a way in, how do you do that? How do women? Because as David's statistics showed, you're still in the minority, women who get to become mayors.
I think, well, women need women mentors, first of all. I have had several good women who mentored me even before I ran the first time. And I think that allows us to see other women in leadership positions and how that works. It happens that here in Lexington, people are very friendly toward women whom they perceive to be capable, smart, and able to do the job. I'm the third female mayor in my district. When I was running for council, I was, one of 4 or 5 women who had served in that position. Lexington, as a university town, I think really will elect good women. And when Pam Miller was the first female person ever elected to office here, it was 1974, right after our city-county merger. And so she was really ahead of her time, but people accepted her and elected her. And so I really feel that here people do educate themselves on the candidates for the most part. Now, I will say I had a 4-year break between being on the council and being vice mayor and being mayor, and people still thought I was on the council, And it's like, I haven't been on the council for 2 years.
Oh, no,
yes, you
the
are.
half-life of an old job. The half-life of an old
yes.
job is like uranium.
Yes.
It never goes away.
But really, good mentors meant a lot to me personally. Pam Miller was one of my very first here, and then Isabel Yates, whom about everybody in this audience knows, who was a vice mayor and a council member, and they were strong women. I saw strong women in leadership, and that made a huge difference for me personally.
So this is a little delicate, but I think women years ago had to be more like a man to get ahead. They hid their babies. I used to put my jacket on the back of my desk chair and sneak out to a soccer game, even in the dead of winter, to make people think I was there and I wasn't going to a soccer game. I mean, better if I were going to anything but not a kid's game. And now that's not the case. There's a critical mass of women, but that period, I think that still applies somewhat to women running for president. That glass ceiling is still there. I want to get back to being Secretary of HHS, but think about that. Of the women in the cabinet, all of them who are with you, all so qualified, and yet if any of them ran for president, they might have run up against, what Hillary ran up against, which was, oh, I'm all for a woman president, just not this woman. But now there are five women, maybe there are only 4 now. But is any woman here running? I mean, there were like 10 at one time. You could announce here and now.
President.
Well, I'll give you a big boost. I'll write a whole column about you. But, this woman I'm not going to vote for. But now there are lots of women. But there still seems to be reasons that people come up with for not this woman and not this time, because it's a risky thing. Someone said, no social experimentation, in 2020, maybe 2024, but 2020 it still feels like it's 2 steps to vote for a woman. Will everybody else vote for that woman? So why does that glass ceiling persist despite all the women who've had all these great jobs and proved themselves?
Well, let me go back a step or two before we get to that ceiling. David had a statistic about risk-taking, and I am a believer. I don't know about the mayor or you, Margaret, about I do think it's a characteristic that too often is screened out of girls at a very early age. Boys are taught to take risks. I have been in way too many places where the men in the room are not as bright as this table. And halfway through a question, their hands are up. I mean, they don't even know what the question is, but for God's sakes, they know the answer. And the women are going to get one more class or one more training program, or not quite ready, or go to law school or qualify. So I do think risk-taking is a characteristic that those of us who now are someplace, we have to teach, train, mentor, pull young women into a riskier situation. And I don't mean jumping off the top of the Washington Monument risk. I mean, you cannot go through a door unless you open it, and you can't get a job unless you apply for it. I mean, you may not get it, you may not get every office you run for, but that risk is important. Secondly, the whole issue of children. It is totally outrageous in this country that we are the only developed nation in the world without paid parental leave. It's wrong. It has to change. And we may be in 2019, but that burden falls enormously on women over and over again. They take a step out. I mean, I would, I'm glad to see my kids who are doing a lot more sharing of tasks, but my son didn't carry the babies. He doesn't nurse the baby. I mean, there still is this factor that falls more heavily on women. And I think it's one of the things we have to change. When I was in the insurance commission, so first of all, when I was pregnant, and at that point running a bar association before I ran for office at all, I had a woman OBGYN. My first son was born in 1981, and I was really struggling with, do I take leave? If so, how long? How long do I stay? I don't know. I figured all along I would be a great dad. I was very unclear about being a mom. I thought I can go to games. I'll be really good at that. I'm a jock. I can help coach. I can do these things, but this mom thing may be a little more than I'm cut out for. But my OBGYN said, take your baby to work, 1981. I was the only woman. I mean, this association was heavily male. I said, well, what does that mean? She explained to me, for 6 months, they're not up and running around, and you want a nurse, and take your baby to work, have a backup plan, but, this will work fine. So I did. And the bosses at the time really thought I had lost my mind. On the other hand, they didn't want me to quit. And I made it clear that that was sort of the choice, and it worked beautifully. Fast forward to insurance commissioner. Our office wanted family-friendly policies, and they meant, let's park a little closer to the office, let's do this. I said, why not a babies to work program? They're like, this is now 1995. What they didn't know is I had done it, and I knew it would work. And so they created this incredible document of, how to kick a bad baby out of the office, what to do if you're You know, and I listened patiently and said, okay, for 6 months, and it was for a man or woman. If you want to bring your infant with you for the first 6 months, and a lot of men at that time had wives with very short maternity leaves. They were going to have to go back to work. And so we had some terrified young dads bring their children to the office. But the first woman who got pregnant was in the legal department, brings her baby in, and after about 2 weeks she comes. I have this emergency call. She has to come see me in the office. And she came in and she said, you have to help me. The general counsel, Brian, who had no children of his own and had complained to me saying, you know, we're running a law firm here. This baby work thing, I said, just shut up. Just try it. You know, here's the chapter on kicking the bad baby out. You've got all the recourse here. So if it doesn't work, you have every opportunity to throw the baby out the door. So here's the mom, and she's saying, I don't know what to do. And I said, I'm really sorry. I really hoped he would come around. She said, he won't leave her alone. He won't leave Caitlin alone. I put her down for a nap. Brian comes in and picks her up. I'm trying to keep her on a schedule. You have to make him keep the schedule. He sits in, talks to her. So it all got solved. And then he came to see me at the end of the 6 months and said, it's too soon. She can't leave. She can't. 6 months is not. Now, her parents were fine with adjusting to. Brian remained. I mean, we had 30 babies go through that. And then we put it in place statewide when I was governor, in every agency that we possibly could. So there are ways that you can create a different kind of environment. We still need paid maternity and paternity leave so parents can be parents, and so you don't have to put your jacket on the back of a chair and pretend we don't have children anymore. But with Hillary, let me just say one story and then I'll stop. Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas, who was an amazing woman, was a mentor of mine. When I ran for governor in 2002, there had only been 12 women in the history of the United States ever elected governor on their own. There'd been women appointed, you know, or a lieutenant governor taking over, but 12 women in the entire United States ever. So it was pretty rarefied air. And Ann Richards had this great story. She did what I like to call girl governor camp. There were about 6 of us running that year. And she and Emily's List and the Democratic Party put together this group. And they did a lot of polling about what voters were looking for and why these talented women were not being elected governor. You know, are you too tough? Are you tough enough? Are you a witch or a bitch? Are you, you know, is your skirt too long or too short? How's your haircut? You know, just on and on and on. So Ann had this great Texas accent and her big bouffant hairdo. And she said, okay, you need to listen to me. I'm going to tell you what voters are thinking about you. They're never going to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. She said, any topic, they're going to think about you differently than men. But let's just take men. She said, if you are running for office and you are single, they think you couldn't get a man. If you're married, they think you're neglecting your man. If you're divorced, you couldn't keep your man. And if you're widowed, you killed your man. So she said, it isn't fair, it isn't right, but that's what they're thinking. So just get ready. And I thought it was a great kind of characterization. It really doesn't matter kind of what it is you're doing. There is going to be some thought that you are different and you have done something. People would ask me when I would go door to door, where are your children? And what I really wanted to say is, how many times do you ask a man who comes to your door that question? They would say to me things like, are you running as a woman candidate? What the hell? I mean, what are my choices? I mean, very serious, you know, it's like, maybe not, you know, got any other ideas? But it is, so it is still something that we're always, you know, juggling that little balance of where are you and who are you and I don't know anybody who looks like you. But at the end of the day, in Kansas at least, people who will cross a party line more quickly than their spouses or partners are women. Republican women and independent women would vote for a woman candidate, and we've seen it. And in 2018, we elected our third woman governor and flipped a seat from red to blue, both with women who managed to get, votes in a very Republican state. So it does happen.
So we're at the good news part, but can I rewind to the dumb as a table part again? You brought it up.
Yeah.
So Speaker Pelosi tells a story that she arrived in Congress and there was a special committee to work on a new health care plan for members of Congress. And she was put on that committee, but it was made up of 11 men and 1 woman. And she sat there, and the big issue that week was maternity care and how it would be included and what specifically would be included. And the meeting went on for an hour with men talking about epidurals and how long it would stay and all of that. But showing actually...
And by that point, Nancy Pelosi had only had 5 children, so...
In totally clueless. And so finally she's, this is her first term. She waves her hand and says, I have 5 children. I know a little bit about it. But she said, basically they said, oh, well, fine. We'll get to you later. So you can have all the expertise in the world and you can be with men that are dumb as a table about what's going on, but you don't always get to talk.
That's right.
So, Mayor Linda, what's your, have you had, as a woman mayor, or did you run as a woman mayor?
Well, now you've got me thinking about that.
Fess up right now.
It's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question.
Did you put something
I
over your
never
head?
thought about it until you brought it up. I do want to say back to the risk question. I think back in 1981, when you brought your baby to work, you took a risk. That was 1981. Of course, the young people in the audience weren't born, and do not, that's quite a while ago. So you took the risk. 38 years, because I have a son born that year also. You took a risk right then and there, but you knew it was the right thing to do. I think when it comes to risk taking, back to that question, you gather your information and then you do your best to figure out what is the best approach.
Yep.
And you needed to bring your child to work. So, we take risks all the time. Some are small risks, some are big risks, right? But we do them in a way that we are informed if we're doing it right from my viewpoint.
But there's more incrementalism
Yes.
on women's parts. So many men think they can run for president because they had a job,
Not many women, I think, think that.
They don't-
Do you?
No.
No.
They
Well,
simply
I came from a very traditional female profession. I'm a registered nurse. And when I was growing up, I'm a product of the 60s. When I was growing up, women became nurses, they became teachers, they became secretaries. It was the outlier women who went to law school, like my friend Jennifer Kaufman. Where are you? You were on the cutting edge of that, because most women didn't think of that. And so I came through a traditional profession where, what I did when I started having my children was nursing was very portable. I could go in and come out of it. I came out of it for a few years, and then I went back in it. And it was easier to do that in my profession. And in some ways, the expectation was there. Many women did that in my profession.
But I also think that, there's, there are pathways to a lot of places. I was the product of an all-girls education. So I didn't live in a world, I had 4 children in our family also, a brother a year older and a brother a year younger, and I knew that world well. But I was never told overtly or covertly that women could be the treasurers but not the president, that women could be the cheerleaders but not play the sport. We had the dumbest in the class and we had the smartest in the class. We had the ballerinas and the athletes. And that atmosphere, I think, was a very powerful message to the notion that you really could do any kind of thing. And so I did have that sort of environmental assistance along the way. But I also think that, you know, as we look at the numbers, and David talked about the numbers, you know, about 29% of elected execs at state levels are women. About 29% of state legislators are women. Drops to about 25% of the United States Senate, and then to 23% of the United States House. And 51% of the country are women. So we still, you know, we have made some progress, but boy, there is a ferocious ceiling. And the more money you get paid in public office, the less women there are in that office. You want a town hall kind of legislator in New Hampshire and you get $5 for every meeting, there are a lot of women there. You have a California full-time state legislature that makes, you know, $100,000 a year and has an office. There are many fewer women in there. So,
You know, I have a theory that when a profession gets more women in it, it's when men are leaving it. And no offense to you, but when medicine became less profitable as a profession, more women got into being doctors. At least every doctor
Doesn't
I go
offend
to
me.
now is
Yeah.
female. Michael, are you going to tell us when we go to questions? Because I don't have a.
Gina will.
I don't have a watch. Oh, Gina will. Okay. I can't see you though, Gina. You have to move over if you. Or here, I could turn around. You know, I went to, I think girls' schools are so empowering, and I had nuns, so I was like fiercely, I mean, I wouldn't lead the life I live without those nuns. And
I agree.
I sent my daughter to girls' school just because of that, but there were no nuns, and I don't think it was quite as good for her. But you know, there is maybe more in Washington. I feel like it's more in Washington than here, and the women I met here today, that the Congress and Capitol Hill and is like still a bastion of, you know, sexism is alive. You know, there are probably men still swimming nude in that pool and locking the door to the gym. A few months ago, when Senator Amy Klobuchar announced she was running for president, the first story about her was based on a survey that's taken by a private firm that uses spotty statistics that had her on the 10 worst boss list. There were a couple of women on it, and this is what greeted her when she started running. So many members of Congress treat their staff like rented mules that to single out Amy Klobuchar as a bad boss is so unfair. And the statistics, the way they gather them, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And so this followed her, and there were just various stories, like the one about she ate a salad with a comb and asked the staff to wash it. Now, I would have asked the staff to wash the comb
First.
before I ate the salad. But I've seen much worse on the campaign trail when you're trying to make a. But these pieces of a woman's life are taken and exaggerated and used against them in a way I've never seen a story about what Mitch McConnell eats or how he treats his staff. I've never seen one.
So there's a,
wears.
I don't know if you're familiar, Mayor, with the Barbara Lee Foundation, but there is a
Oh,
foundation.
at Rutgers. Is that?
No, she is in Boston. She divorced well twice and had dedicated her resources. She was part of a group that was interested in electing a woman president. This was 20 years ago. And they finally started looking around and decided if they couldn't elect women as governors, they would never, you know, if you couldn't be a CEO of the state, we'd never have a CEO of the country. And so they wanted to do a lot of polling and looking around what were voters looking at, but also what did the press do? And this was very fascinating, and they've updated it a couple of times. And what they found is over and over and over again in an array of candidates, a woman would be introduced by the press story by either what she was wearing, what she ate, what was in her car, and the man would be introduced by his business credentials. Never what he wore, but what he had done, what his accomplishments were. And it was documented in a number of stories. Gail Shetler, very accomplished lieutenant governor of Colorado, is introduced by having wrappers of papers in a car and how many miles she had on the car and this and that. And the guy she's running against is described with a series of attributes. So that data was given to a lot of us. I went to my first debate in 2002 with a sea of men, and I was a sitting statewide office holder. One of the Republicans was a statewide office holder, and the rest of them, there were a couple of businessmen, a legislator. They were each described in turn, what Linda Gorton, longtime city council member, mayor, planning commission member, blah, 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 blah. That was the men's description. My description was that it didn't even mention the fact that I held an office. I was at the debate in a two-piece green suit, open-toed sandals. It was July in Kansas. It was very warm. Open-toed sandals and pink nail polish on my toes.
Oh my
Literally.
gosh.
That was the lead two sentences of the. Not that I had been a 4-term legislator. Not that I had been the state insurance commissioner. That was the lead story. But because we were kind of prepared for it, my press secretary called the author of the story, who was the AP reporter, and said, "Shame on you. What is the matter with you? You have a 12-year-old daughter. Read the descriptions that you have given to these 6 candidates you had on the stage. How could you do that?" And he was frankly horrified and shocked. He never wrote that again. But it wouldn't have ever even occurred to me I would have read it like, well, of course they're describing me this way, until this national polling showed that over and over again, that's the way. So that's the way Amy Klobuchar was going to be credentialed by press, who was going to hit her with that. It didn't matter that she was a prosecutor. It didn't matter that she's a successful senator.
I plead guilty, by the way, to doing that myself. In some ways, women give themselves a pass to write about other women in more personal ways, because we're always looking, male or female, for something human about our leaders, just to relate to them, because we're looking at our insides and comparing them to their outsides, and you want to get inside a little bit. So there's a terrible temptation to do it. I, however, was defending Amy Klobuchar, even though I think she probably is a bad boss.
She is a bad boss.
Yeah.
Several of her former staffers worked for me. But there are lots of other bad bosses.
I know.
She is not alone.
Yeah, she is not alone in this. Mayor Gorton, how do you find women to bring along? How do you do that? I get
As a
letters
mentor
every week
or-
asking what you can do, and since there are no jobs in journalism, I used to tell anybody called, listen, just go get a job at your local paper. That's the way to do it. There are no local papers. So it's really hard. I tell them to go to an NGO or try to get a policy background and then try to become a writer.
Well, and one of the ways I do it is I work with lots of women in different organizations in the community, and many of them are young women coming up, and they're in their first job, or they're moving through getting a new job. And I think it's important for women in positions of leadership to proactively encourage young women. I recently had a young woman who said to me, I'm kind of thinking about running for council. I don't know what to do. And I said, let's have coffee and talk about it, because there's a way you do this, and it's difficult if you just jump into it not knowing anything. And so I'm always looking for young women. It doesn't have to be a young woman, but someone who is thinking about this but doesn't know what to do. And then on a different issue, I wanted to go back to something you said. You said something like, maybe Lexington's different. I will tell you, there is still bias here, and one of the places I have seen it, particularly during my campaign, was on social media. Social media is, with me, a love-hate relationship. And in
Anonymity brings out the
Oh,
misogyny
yes.
really
Yeah.
badly.
Bullies.
Last
Yeah.
year, during my campaign, someone with a male-sounding name, something like James Smith, that's kind of male-sounding, said, "Why don't you just go back to the kitchen?" And I didn't have to say a word because everybody else on Facebook beat him up over that comment. It is out there. And it can be subtle, and it can be people choose anonymous ways to do it. But I didn't have to do a thing because other people did it for me. Is it time?
Oh, is it time for questions? Okay.
If you want to answer one more.
Oh, I'm looking for this poll that I pulled out, where the essence of it was there were these candidates that were people thought it was a real poll, and they got one result when it was obvious who was the woman and who was the man, and then when they mixed it up, the results were completely turned over, and this is this year. So that, if you're going to make Elizabeth Warren Bernie Sanders, that doesn't work because now Bernie Sanders is down in the polls. But then Elizabeth Warren as Bernie Sanders would be winning, if you get my drift here. That if you don't know it's a woman, your bias is still to choose those characteristics as the person you're going to support. And so there's still in the back of your mind. When I actually know people, Al Cross said to me, "Oh, Mitch McConnell didn't dislike you," or something like that. I would expect that he might not like me, but if you know people, you can overcome the bias. Mm-hmm. But my social media is, I can't look at it because I'm just too destabilized by it. Mm-hmm. So I try not to. Mm-hmm. I do think it's reserved for women. When I was on Capitol Gang, Robert Novak, who was one of the most unlikable people on earth, he couldn't, I showed him, and he was shocked by it. How can that be? But it was.
Well, also, bullies can pick out women.
Yeah, they're perceived as.
But they can find you.
Mm-hmm.
I could line up 6 of my male colleagues on the cabinet. They couldn't pick them out of a room full of 10 people. I mean, nobody has any idea sort of what they look. I mean, I would have people walking down the street screaming at me. It's like, "That lady is destroying our country." Yes, thank you. But there is also a thing about women that it's much more identified. I mean, sometimes that's a good thing. Yes. They know who you are. They find you in the grocery store. They know. But there's also, it does attract a lot of really angry people.
So we have a ways to go. But next time we come, I wanted to say the dominant role of women in public policy. We are half. We're half.
Or as the Chinese say, women hold up half the sky. I like to remind them that also we gave birth to the guys who are holding up the rest of the sky. So it's our sky, right? The whole thing.
Okay, so now we are going to allow the audience to ask questions, and probably you'll need a mic so you can come. Sure.
This is kind of...
Hello, my name is Sai, and I'm a senior at the College of Public Health, interested in healthcare policy. I wanted to know, what are your tips for a young woman trying to find a mentor?
Wow.
Well,
I would start with teachers who may have an interest in, I don't know where you are interested in working, but somebody in the profession where you want to find yourself. So if it's when you say public health, I don't know if it's a health department or but I think finding somebody who shares a lot of interests and knows things that you want to know. Often, I at least find people are very flattered to say, if some, young, smart, eager student comes and says, I want to know what you are doing and whether or not I could do something like it, or how did you get where you are. That is never a question that I think is, in my experience, that you turn away from. It's actually a great way to open a conversation. So I think the best way to find a mentor is a person who you like, admire, think are doing things you want to do, think you might want to know what they do, and just knock on their door, call them on the phone, open the door, ask for an office hour, and just go talk. My
That's what-
experience is positive in that.
I was going to say, don't be afraid to contact someone you don't know, but you have seen or know of, or, however you know of them. And I would say, look around you. You are certainly involved in things outside of the classroom, inside the classroom. Be aware of who's around you. The women, if you're looking for a female mentor, look around and see who's out there. When I very first was considering running, I called Isabel Yates, our former vice mayor, and I had never met her. I did not know her. And she was highly regarded already in our community, and I thought, oh gosh, should I really call this woman? But I did, and she was wonderful to talk with me about what it meant to run for office. And the funny part of that is I said, now just tell me exactly, how many meetings do you have? And she laughed and she said, oh, darling, that just varies. You don't really know what you're getting into. But look around and see the women you think you'd like to talk with. And don't be afraid to go up and ask them.
So I sometimes pick out women that I think need my help. So there's a conference call every week, and on Mondays, for your queries, what's up this week. And if you're on a phone call, you only know people by their voices, and you concentrate more. And I noticed there are two women who are always saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." Now, women, I myself say sorry 100 times a day when I have nothing to be sorry about. It's like a little tick I think women have. But I noticed it in others, and I said, there was a guy who took your idea, so you don't have anything to be sorry about. Let's have coffee. And there's, in politics, I think it's not what do you know, it's a lot of who you know.
Right.
And trying to, a guy who knows a guy. I know a girl who knows that there's more. I know a girl who knows a girl. And that helps too. I went to, as I said, girls' school, and then I went to Penn State University, nowhere near the Ivy League. And when I got to Washington and I was done with law school I shouldn't have gone to, I wanted to get into journalism, but it was filled with Ivy League people. I mean, Time magazine was just nothing but it. But my first job was I worked for Ralph Nader, and so they kind of admired Ralph Nader. So I was a source, they needed to write about him. So that's how I sort of wended my way into this other world. But it is a lot about, you want to know the person who knows the person, and don't be afraid to go up to the person. I love it when people come up to me and ask me. Mm-hmm. So ask.
I think that's an invitation. Thank you. Other questions?
The question that interests me is if you were to look into the future and predict that the percentage of office holders who are women would increase, does that imply a movement of public policy in one direction or another on subjects like, for example, fiscal policy, foreign policy, crime policy? The sort of issues that are resolved at the national level. I don't know, David, whether you mentioned this, but I'm going to assume for the moment that the percentage of Democrat public policy holders or public office holders who are women is higher than the percentage of Republican office holders who are women. So if you looked into the future and said, well, the percentage of women is going to increase, instinctively, on the basis of the current makeup, you would say, well, that means there will be more Democrats. That will tilt the balance in favor of the Democrat platform. But I'm trying to get past the partisan aspect of it, and I'm trying to get to sort of the inherent. I know this is sort of an invitation for generalizations, but is there sort of a feminine perspective on issues of public policy that you can identify and say more women means it's more likely to go in this direction? If so, what would that be?
Well, I want to say a couple things about that, Brad. I am, as the leader of an organization with 3,000 employees and a $379 million general fund budget and 325,000 bosses, my bosses, I do not look at issues through at least I don't think I do. Now, maybe some of my friends can tell me different. I don't believe I look at issues through a female lens. I personally look at issues more through a healthcare lens because that's my background. I think that issues are issues. And as many people in Lexington know, the first issue I faced my second week in office was that our revenues were trending downward and our fixed costs were going upward. Now, I needed to deal with that, and I did deal with that. And this is where we need to be, is that whether the leader's a man or a woman, you look at the issues that face you right directly, and you find solutions. And I don't know if I'm odd or what. You grew up with several siblings. I had 2 brothers and a sister. There were 4 of us. We never got messages growing up about boy, girl. We were just all the time playing flag football, running around the yard, fighting together. I mean, it was just, I didn't grow up with those messages, so I haven't taken those messages with me into office. And when you get into an office, and the governor certainly knows this because she had thousands and thousands of employees, you must face them directly, whether they're what traditionally have been called women's issues. And I don't, I try to move forward. Our son and our son-in-law are huge participants in their children's rearing. They take care of the kids, they feed the kids, they do, it's a joint effort. I think things are changing to a degree that many people look more at issues. And we have to face financial issues every day. And those traditionally would have been men's issues, wouldn't they? But they're not anymore if you are in a leadership position.
Well, I also think that a couple things. I think everybody brings a unique life experience to an office. So my life experience is different than male life experiences just because of the fact that I'm a female and I've had kids. It doesn't necessarily mean that I share a philosophy, but it means my life experience is different. I think it's why I'm a big believer that having public bodies that look more like the community they're serving, and that includes gender, and it includes race, and it includes diversity of all kinds, you have then a better sense of what that public policy needs to look like. But, you know, thinking about the cabinet, you were asking about this earlier. I mean, when I was on the president's cabinet, we had a woman who was the head of the Homeland Security Department, not certainly a female role. We had a woman who was the National Director of Intelligence. We had women who were serving as head of the EPA and the Health Department, in a whole variety of, and we had a male Secretary of Education and a male Secretary of, so there weren't these gender roles. There never has been a woman who has been the Defense Secretary. There never has been a woman who has been the Treasury Secretary. Those are two that still have not had a woman leader. But I think women have served in what have been traditionally female roles. I mean, when I was in the legislature, a woman could chair the Education Committee and maybe the Health Committee, but nothing else. That has changed dramatically. So I don't think it's necessarily that when you get more women, you have one philosophy or another. I've served with very conservative women and very liberal women and smart women and some not so smart women. It isn't that gender stereotype holds, but I think having more women in elected office, like we have more women in the population, just means that there's a broader conversation with every issue and a broader viewpoint of every issue. Having African Americans serve, having Latinos serve, having LGBTQ members serve looks more like the community, and that the policies are different and better for that.
Can I end this little segment on a Debbie Downer note?
No.
When a job gets identified as a woman's job, I think sometimes it goes down. And the UN ambassador now has had more women than men. It's been more identified with men, and now it's no longer a cabinet job. It's been knocked down a notch. And someone said, now the job is to lay low and make tea.
That's kind of sad, isn't
it? And one Kelly Craft, who's from Kentucky, right?
Yes.
Is now no insult to Kentucky here, but I just think the job has been somewhat downgraded. Are we done?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, that really was a bad note to end
Yeah,
on.
that is not
No. I take that back. Is there something pleasant I could say? This has been really great. You're a great audience. I thank you.
Yes, wonderful.
That's a terrible way to end.
Had you known it was the end.
And on behalf of all the women and men of the Martin School, I want to thank all the audience for coming, and we want to provide a little Kentucky blue, not Kansas blue, for our guests to take home. So thanks to all of you for attending, and thanks to the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.